Welcome back to Mindful Connections with Faith, the Inspired Therapist. What we're going to be looking at today is how relationships can be impacted by childhood trauma. What we recognize through things like the Adverse Childhood Events Survey. So, through the ACEs, we're able to identify that there are events in children's lives that can impact their futures and their lives as adults. So it can go as far to impact their actual physical health, but it can also impact their mental health and susceptibility to other concerns. With our primary focus being on relationships, that's what we're going to be looking at is how these adverse events can impact our ability to present in our relationships and show up in a way that we would want to be seen and heard and felt in those relationships. So that's what we're going to be taking the time to explore in our discussion today. A lasting imprint can be made from what people experience in their childhoods. So it's important to understand which different events a person experiences and how that can impact them later on in their lives. So I'm not going to review all of the different events that can take place in childhood that can impact people, but we can discuss a couple of them. So one of them is going to be emotional abuse. Another can be physical abuse on the other side of that. In the same way, there's going to be physical neglect and emotional neglect. Other events that can happen may pertain to a parent's absence. So that could be either through separation or divorce. It may be through mental health concerns, and it could also be through physical health concerns. So we know oftentimes if a child is not consistently connected with a parent or somebody who can be a solid object for them that they can go to, that they know is reliable, that there is some type of consistency and structure there, then it can be very hard for them to see other people as reliable when they become adults. If a child is left to manage their own feelings and emotions because a parent is absent, then what they will do as adults is tend to shrink away from others when it's time to deal with issues. They don't really know how to problem solve in the relationship itself with another person. They'll find it more comforting to deal with their emotions on their own. So it's very hard for this type of individual to see the value in co-regulation, which is something that can be very beneficial in relationships to help with bonding and maintaining that relationship. Another form of absenteeism that may take place is when a parent may have an issue with substances. So that parent can't be fully present at the time with that child. They may not be able to address the emotions of that child or even some of the physical needs of that child. So it can very much cross over into some of those other types of events that I just mentioned earlier. Another one of the concerns that can happen or the events that can happen in childhood may also have to deal with a parent's incarceration. So we've seen recently that there's a TV show called Unprisoned with Kerry Washington. And I think that that provides a good depiction of what it can look like when a child may have missed something in their childhood with the parent not being present and is then trying to reconstruct what life is supposed to look like for them as an adult. We see how that may impact the relationships there, but it may also impact their own ability to parent and what they see is needed for their own child at that time. So that's where some of the crossover occurs. We know that a lot of times a child may have challenges in their relationships, but that can also carry over into the next generation when they become parents themselves. What we develop as a result of having some of these experiences as children are often looked at as protective mechanisms. So our brain starts to develop a way of keeping us safe, and it wants to make sure that we don't have the same amount of pain that we previously experienced. There's kind of like this little shock that goes through our system that tells us this is something that I want to avoid. So, with our protective mechanisms, that is their function. They're doing the best job that they can to keep us in a safe space. It's not intended to harm anyone or to personalize anything with anyone else as we get older, but that's just what our system needs in order to try and maintain a status quo for us that feels good, that remains comforting, and that doesn't put us in a place of vulnerability where we could re-experience the harm that we felt like we experienced previously. So some of the ways that we do this may be developing a really hard time of trusting others, especially if we know that there's been some kind of breakdown before in a very close relationship. It's going to be hard to want to get close to people again. And all of that is just so that we do not feel hurt at the end of the day. So a lot of times people will build up a wall to try and keep others out. At the same time, that wall also keeps them bordered up and inside. So it's hard to connect with others if you're not able to have a reasonable level of trust for another person. Another example of a protective mechanism may also be when we start to fear vulnerability. So, in the same sense of that wall being there, it's like you don't even want to open the door when something is going on. When you're having a hard time dealing with your own emotions, you don't want to let anybody know that that's the case. Like, there's no way that you would want anyone to know that your guard was down or that you're not completely shielded, because that feels scary. And again, if we're trying to keep um, a status quo of feeling safe, we're not going to have that if we're also letting people know that we're vulnerable. So these things start to create some barriers in relationships, and they can carry into adult relationships. And that's where we would also recognize that connection with attachment. So you're going to see differences with secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and the different styles of avoidant attachment if these things are not there, or if these barriers have become present. Another barrier that may be presented if someone isn't feeling completely safe being vulnerable or has a lot of difficulty trusting someone is going to be their likelihood to sabotage a situation. We will see this oftentimes in adult relationships, but they could even show up in childhood relationships and friendships. So if someone gets too close to that child and that child starts to feel like it's vulnerable to care about another person or to let another person care about them, they may start to perform in ways and show behaviors that would push that person away. A lot of times that is unintentional, or it's happening in their subconscious. It's not something that they're fully aware of, but they just know that it feels uncomfortable or it feels unsafe. It may very well be a safe environment or a safe person that they're dealing with, but because of their previous experiences with people who were supposed to be safe, it becomes very hard to distinguish between the two. And therefore, they will start to sabotage that relationship by doing certain things that would keep that person from being able to be connected with them in the long term. Now let's get to the meat of the issue. We know what the events are that can cause challenges in attachment and later on in adult relationships. We know what some are, the barriers are that can be developed from those events. Now let's take a look at a way that we can start to heal those different things that have come up through the childhood events that were experienced. Now, although these next few steps that I'm going to present don't necessarily come from a model, a therapeutic model, I'll say as it relates to attachment itself, they are still very good steps and have helped people heal through a number of different concerns that they may have experienced. So, we're going to be looking at the 3 A's and how they might apply to healing so that you can participate in healthy relationships. The first of the 3 A's is awareness. If you are aware that you have a fear of abandonment as a result of any of those events that we mentioned earlier, then it becomes a lot easier to put some sort of acknowledgement towards that and recognition, in stating that this is the issue, this is the concern, and now I can do something about it. So it's much easier to empower yourself from a place of awareness of knowing what has made that contribution to your life and what the impact of that contribution has been. The acknowledgement of it then also includes accepting that these are just the facts of what happened. When you were a child, these different events took place, And now it can be up to you as an adult to try and address those in the best way possible. So you may have to employ some different types of strategies in order to negate, what was introduced to you as a child. And that is perfectly fine. You're going to be retraining yourself, reteaching yourself, giving yourself some new skills that weren't available at the time that you were a child. And then finally, you'll want to put some action towards those different strategies. So you have to actually implement the strategies that you learn about and that you take the time to explore to give yourself an opportunity to have something different. A lot of times we will hear the phrase that if you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, you know the rest. You know what you're going to get. So, with that being said, if we want to be able to have something different in our lives, we have to employ some different strategies and actually put them to work. A lot of times in therapy, I can present what may be useful, what may be recommended, but it's going to be up to that individual person to actually use them outside of the session. So, a lot of the therapy that's done doesn't just take place in the session, it takes place when the person goes home and tries to use some of the different things that we've discussed in the session. So, in the same way, these can be strategies once you learn about them that you can start to employ and give yourself an opportunity to do something different. I haven't said already, but I will say if you feel like you have some different things going on in your life that can't be addressed in the ways that you've addressed them before, in the ways that have kept you safe before, or that have given you enough skill to get to your life and through your life up to this point, please feel free to reach out to a therapist. That's what they're there for, to help identify what goals you may have for yourself and to give you an opportunity to do some things to reach those different goals. An important concept in the African American community is community. And so you can also use that to your benefit. If you feel as if some of these things are showing up for you, then it becomes important to engage with your community even more. So, whether that means finding the safe people in your family where you can start to increase that sense of security with a particular person, then that may be beneficial. Another part of the community oftentimes may be related to your spiritual practice. So, whatever that may be for you, if you can engage with people that you feel safe with and going over spiritual concepts and having some sort of connection there, that may also help you in your healing process. So, we wouldn't want to ignore that or put that on the back burner. If that is integral to who you are, then it's important to incorporate that as well. Last but not least, we can look at creating a new narrative as an opportunity to help you heal from childhood trauma. A lot of times in therapy, this is a concept that's used specifically in trauma focused therapy to help people understand a little bit better the layers that are included and help them to integrate that information as a whole story versus just one picture of an event or pictures of several events that have taken place over the course of their lifetime. It becomes important when redefining things for yourself that you're not replacing the memories of what happened, but you're giving yourself another perspective of what happened. So, a lot of times in reviewing your feelings, your thoughts, your interpretations of those different events, you're able to explore some new ways that you can take a look at those things so that they don't continue to impact you in the same way in your current life that they impacted you previously. So that's another kind of creative measure that can be used to help you get through challenging situations and traumatic situations that you've experienced as a child. A lot of times, again, we're going to circle back to therapy because that is one of the safer environments where you can do an exercise like that and make sure that you have the proper guidance to get through it and make sure that you're fully supported by someone who sees you, who can hear you, and can help you identify where some of those messages that you received as a child may need to be challenged and may need to be redefined so that you can have healthier relationships in your current life. If you're wanting to give yourself the best chance at healthy relationships, it's important to try and address your childhood trauma. You can do that through some of the different measures that we discussed. We want to be able to take an honest look at those events that you experienced and also look at how they are providing barriers for you to those healthy relationships so that you can begin to eventually take action towards fully addressing that and changing that for yourself. You want to be able to give yourself a new measure so that you can experience the love, so that you can acknowledge the resilience that it took to get through those situations, and that you can give yourself a chance to have the healthy relationships that it seems like you want if you've made it to the end of this video. Do appreciate you taking the time to kind of listen in and see what options may be explored for you. Thank you for spending time with Faith, the Inspired Therapist, today. Hopefully, you are a part of the Inspired Misfit community. Please feel free to like, share, and comment so that I can continue to provide this type of information. Your support means everything to me, and I want to continue to be able to support my community through offering this information. I'll see you back here for our next Mindful Connections installment. And as always, stay inspired, Misfits.